So you all have missed a big part of it, but it's all on video. And I was telling that you'll see on the church site, there's 4 or 5 families that actually watch the class every week by video. And we've been looking at apologetics. How do we defend the faith? How do we know that Jesus is the only way to heaven? And there are essentially, this little acronym came up in the 70s, MAPS, M-A-P-S, manuscripts, and we looked at all of that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about language today. Archaeology, we're starting archaeology today. P is prophecy, and then S is statistics, 14,000 fragments and 40 authors over 150 years and so on and so on. There's lots of statistics that support how accurate all of this is. But today we're going to start on archaeology, and I love this verse. I had it in my dissertation. They made me take it out. Supposed to be academic. Too polemic when you put that in there. But I want to read 2 Corinthians 10:5a this morning. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And one of the things that we'll learn, we're going to have art in the dark today. There's a projector. We're going to turn the lights out in a little bit. And one of the things you'll learn while we're going through that, there's lots of critics, Bible critics, higher critics, they call it. And when you get into archaeology, there's plenty more. So we have to be careful that we understand what ground truth is and what the counter arguments are so that we can literally do battle with the critics of the Bible. And even if you don't want to do battle with them, it will give you a solid idea or a solid footing for your faith in Christ, that the Bible is absolutely accurate. It is absolutely the only Word of God, and Jesus is the only Messiah. So a few terms this morning, and then we're going to look at a few neat things, and then we're going to turn the lights out, and nobody's allowed to go to sleep. Ostracon is not a 1940s Italian sports car. Just you may have owned one, but no. So we're going to learn about that this morning. Sherds and shards, demotic or demotic, tomato, hieroglyphics and Greek. Those will come up. Ostracon. One of the most common things when you're out at a site digging are busted up pieces of pottery. It's the most common thing there is. And you're going to see some of those next week. I brought some other cool things this week. They can be called sherds or shards. A lot of people, if you say shard, you're thinking of a sharp piece of glass. But sherds or shards, funny thing in the Middle East. If you're in Jordan and you're excavating, it's called a sherd. Go over to Israel, oh no, it's called a shard. And there's all sorts of little nuances like that between the, they really try to keep themselves separate. We're going to read about a Rosetta Stone, and not the software. We're going to read about the Rosetta Stone, and what's cool about the Rosetta Stone, if you didn't know it, good sized hunk of rock, and they had engraved on it an edict by one of the Ptolemies, Epiphanius the 73rd or something, I don't know, one of those Ptolemy guys, because the Ptolemies were ruling Egypt, the 120s, 130s, was a Ptolemy that ordered the creation of the Septuagint, for example. And the Rosetta Stone is a decree that the Ptolemy Epiphanes something or other is now the pharaoh, essentially. Because there had been a lot of unrest, a lot of revolting back and forth, and finally it had all been squashed. And the emperor in power issued this edict, this decree, and they carved it on this big piece of black granite. And if you ever get to see a picture of it, it's pretty clear that the top piece is one thing, the center piece is another, and then the third is another altogether. And it's what it is 3 languages. Demotic or demotic, depending on how you want to pronounce it, the Egyptians saw as their document language, and you could write on papyrus. Hieroglyphics, of course, are symbols that usually were declared great victories and those kinds of things. Told a story of some kind. The Egyptians took a bunch of slaves and they'd have it on some sort of You go into tombs, Tutankhamun, and all those guys, you'd see hieroglyphics everywhere for different things. And then Greek was the third language. So when Rosetta Stone was discovered, about 4 years later, Champion had translated it. And they didn't know these languages. They knew nothing about Egypt at all. And because they could translate the Greek, these are French in the late 1700s AD, they could translate the Greek. It took 4 years, but they finally translated these two languages, and it started the whole world of Egyptology. So a couple of neat little things that they had to discover first before they could translate. Anybody know what those were? I'm going to be lousy at it. This is not the crude representation of a little bit of Hebrew, but that I don't know how to write demotic. What's interesting about Hebrew, aside from the symbols and things? It reads, well, we read from left to right, I believe. Yeah, they read this way. The Western mind, which I told the classes when we first started, we look at everything with a Western mind, even when we're in the Middle East, and it will mess you up. So the Western mind goes at these symbols, and they're trying to figure these out, and they're trying to go this way. And one of the first things they discovered is demotic or demotic goes right to left. Oriental languages do similar things, right to left. And I'm going to show you a cool thing here in just a second. Then they get down, and they knew the hieroglyphics were symbols. I mean, it's easier looking at symbols. Well, they know what the Greek is. I don't know why I wrote Hebrew up here, but that's all right. They don't know what the symbols are, but they know what the Greek is. And then they started understanding what that was, and they figured out this. How are hieroglyphics read? Well, I got a finger up, and then I got a finger down. And I also get a finger this way. Hieroglyphics can be read right to left, left to right, or down. How do you know? And talk about twisting your mind around. No wonder it took them 4 years. Again, Wes's art ability is horrible. I want to do this. I'm not going to try to put it on a whiteboard. If you think of a symbol, we'll just think of a guy, and a hieroglyphic looks like this. And then you'll see another one where it looks like that, or you'll see another one where he's standing there. If it's like this, that's the direction you're going to read. If it's like this, you're reading that direction. If it's like that, you're reading down. Same with eagles. You know, they were big on birds. Same thing, one wing up, all that. So when they finally figured that all out, that opened up the whole world of Egyptology, all because of archaeology. What else? So we're going to do two more things before I put us in the dark here. Most of you probably aren't into archaeology. There's lots of publications. I get them at home. Some of them will put you to sleep. Bill probably can remember. I don't know, maybe you guys are too young. Biblical Illustrator?
Yeah.
Oh, marvelous magazine the Baptists put out for teachers to use. Great. No more. This is the closest thing I can get to it now. And I don't know if any of you get one of these or not. I'll pass them around a little bit. It's meant for you and I to read. And it's about current activity over there. Really cool magazines, lots of great photos. It gives you an idea what it's like to be in the field and so on. So then the other thing I wanted to give you to really distract you, we talk about the Hebrew going left to right now I'm confused, right to left. This is a birthday card I got one year. I was over with a group in Israel, my birthday. They got me this birthday card. So have a look at that. That'll twist your mind. It opens the wrong way. And then, of course, you can't read it, but if you could, it's reading this direction. It opens backwards. Korean Bibles are like that, by the way. Somebody gets a new book. I noticed on the train when I lived over there, uh, they get on the train with a brand new book. They're at the back of it. And they're coming this way with the thing. Drive you crazy. And then another couple things we'll show you real quick. Then we're going to have the lights out for a little bit, and then I brought some more cool things. So one of the things you're going to hear this morning when we put the slides on, well, I'll save that. So these are some of the things you use in the field. I never got to. You can see that these are about as clean as you can possibly get. And I'll tell you why in a minute. This is an attention getter, if for nothing else, or you can go on and be a dentist if you fail as an archaeologist. Potash, they call that. And then this is a Marshalltown trowel. It is the only one that archaeologists use. The blade is tuned so that if you hit rock, you'll get one sound. If you hit clay, you'll get another. So, and this is more important as you... Archaeology doesn't go in with a spade most of the time, or an axe or something. You remove the ground, which sounds crazy in the beginning, but that's what you do. If we were going to excavate this square right here, we would start scraping side to side. And this is how you dig. And as soon as the surface changes, you'll spot if there's anything hidden there. It's really interesting. If you had a pot, and again, between this week and next, you're going to see a lot of pictures. But so once you see a change, you have to be very careful. You don't want to hurt whatever that is. And if you don't know if it's a stone or a piece of clay, you tap on it with your Marshalls and trowel, and it'll tell you that. I know, it makes you want to go out and dig in the backyard of the church right now. So I have some cool things in here, but I want to show you some neat things. I'm going to sit right beside you here, Bill, if it's all right. I tried sitting in that chair, but it messes up the connection, and then we lose the picture. And we'll let... Pardon me? Yes, that's how we record. Yeah. And then a good friend of mine, pastor, archaeologist, Dr. Attaway, in Virginia, takes these and edits them so that we can then put them on the church website. Oh, we do have a picture. Yes, go right ahead. Thank you, Lonnie. So what we're going to talk about is a field called biblical archaeology, and we'll get into that more in a little bit. Anybody recognize this picture? Probably not. One of the cool things about being over there is you get to experience things you just, in a Sunday school class, you'd never would. This is the cave prison of John the Baptist. The surface here, I'm going to up and down all day, I can tell. The surface here flattens as you go up and becomes the foundation for Herod's home at Machaerus, summer home at Machaerus. And in fact, the Greeks actually built this place, and I'll have pictures next week. It's a whole side of a mountain, a hill, giant thing, full of caves. For some reason, they believe this is the one John was in. I don't know. It's certainly a cave prison, and there's bunches of them. You go just 20 feet to the right of this, you'll see more of them. But on the top, even still today, is the floor of the palace where Salome danced for Herod. And he said, what would you like? And mom said, send, was it Herodias? I think was her name. Anyway, mom said, John the Baptist's head. They came down the side of the hill, cut his head off, took it back up to the dance floor. This is Machaerus. On the other side of what you can't see on this picture is the Dead Sea. It's almost to the middle of the Dead Sea, not quite. And we're on the Jordan side, looking over at the Dead Sea. Jericho would be off to our right, across the water. All right, let's see where my little button is here. So, anybody saw Indiana Jones, you recognize this. Anybody know where this is? So this is Petra. Yeah, exactly. If Janice was here today, I'd get her going. Everything is red, as you can see. And the incredible thing about this, it has nothing to do with the Bible. The work it took to start at the top of that thing and carve it all out and end up where they are. It's just absolutely incredible. And I've been inside, by the way. It's just a big giant hole. It's just a cave. But this was in Indiana Jones. And at the end of it, they ride their horses. What other people don't realize is those horses come flying out of there on the Roman road. It's a Roman road that they're riding across. Sherry and I have come flying out of there in a horse-drawn buggy that almost knocked our teeth loose. But I have this picture up here, well, as long as we're looking for a moment. When they were building, they would anchor things on each end and almost have like planks across. Well, actually, the plank would be carved out of the rock, and you can see a little of that here. You see these marks here, carved into the stone, and then you can see these better over here. These are carved into the stone, and they would carve the stone out enough to where they'd have a ledge to stand on, do the work they needed to do, then carve away or cut away the ledge and go move down to the next one and so on. Incredible. This was done during the Roman period. The Idumeans, which Herod actually was an Idumean. They lived next to the Edomites, but we don't want to go into all that, or I'd be here all day. I love biblical history. Anyway, archaeology is not Indiana Jones. Why do I say that? Because most people, if I'd come today in my little fedora and my leather jacket and played the music, that's archaeology. No, Indiana Jones was a treasure hunter. He was after some piece of something to retrieve it or recover it or something. And yeah, archaeology, we want to go in CSI style. We want to be able to remove the dirt, document what was there, where it was in those layers, do some analysis on soil and a whole bunch of other things, and determine what caused everything to be the way it is and so on. Indiana Jones just goes digging in there, and boom, there's the Ark of the Covenant, and out we go, which won't even go there. So the field of archaeology itself, people don't realize it involves a lot of science, many different ones, for the dating and analysis. You also need to have a good historical knowledge of the area that you're digging in, or you're really not going to understand what you're bringing up. And to say meticulous, it's incredible how meticulous you have to be out in a big pile of dirt. And you're going to see some of that in just a minute. Documentation, which is the bane of every person on the site. Oh, I'll do you do the paperwork. You have to hand draw to scale on graph paper what it is you're digging, where you found these things, codes and all that. It's very meticulous so that they can recreate, because what happens in archaeology, you and your team, I was called a square supervisor, you're doing your thing, then there's another square. You might have 10 squares going on in various places. So the archaeologist running the site, he brings all those papers together, stratigraphy they call it, and he's able to give you a glimpse of everything that's on the. It's just incredible. It's called stratigraphy. The difference between archaeology and biblical archaeology. My doctorate's in biblical archaeology. We use the Bible as our primary source when we go in the field. It's the best geographical record, particularly going back to ancient times, of the geography. And if you can nail down a couple of pieces of geography and then where you're going to dig, you have a pretty good idea of what it is you're excavating. And that was how Dr. Collins arrived at where Sodom was, because they'd excavated Bethel and Ai. If you remember the story of Abraham, and then eventually he returned back. Bethel and Ai put an altar up, praise God, at Bethel. Later, they had too much stuff, and him and Lot were between Bethel and Ai, and Lot looked out over the Jordan River, saw Sodom and the land below it, and went that way. And Jericho, literally, when you're at Sodom, you can see Jericho across the water. So if you know where Jericho and Bethel and Ai are, it's pretty easy to triangulate down. You think where Sodom is. Now, you would think it was easy, but Sodom has been located in a bunch of different places over 100 and some years. And when we get into, we're going to do one whole week, probably next week. I'm going to bring Sodom stuff to class, and we'll go into more about the discovery of it and so on. But the biblical archaeologists, and there's a fair number of us, we trust the Bible unequivocally. Your worldview affects your understanding of archaeological evidence. That's really sort of a no-brainer when you think about it. Christians who go out in the field are going to have that worldview, and it's hard to be unbiased when you're pulling things up out of the ground, unbiased. Well, the same is true for those that don't believe. They're not even going to, it took about close to 15 years for the academic world to accept that what we really had discovered was the site of Sodom's destruction. Now it's accepted by everybody. But it took almost 15 years because they didn't have our worldview. They had a whole different. Christians like, it should say archaeology when it supports, but in any case, they like it when an archaeology supports their view, but not when it doesn't. And I was going to get Janice going real good on this. So we have a lady in the class who's a young Earth person. And all of it from creation to today is 10,000 years or less, which flies in the face of all the evidence we've got. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey is a temple, I think around 2003 or 4, they discovered. That thing's 11,000 years old. Some of the pillars are still standing, some of the altars, all this sort of stuff. And it flies in the face of, so Christians don't like that. No, that's a bad example, don't use that. But if we come up with the David Stela or stele that proves David's kingdom did exist, oh yeah, we like that one. And you can't find the ark yet. Where's Noah's bones? Stuff like that. So we're not without our critics, and I happen to know these people personally. These two on here. There are many, many more, but these two are internationally recognized as outstanding in the field of archaeology. Outstanding. Neither of them believe in the Bible, and both of them believe a lot of it is either fiction or it was propaganda. That's Deaver's thing. And Finkelstein, he thinks everything happened in the Iron Age, and that anything before that is just a myth. That what happened was effectively after the Babylonian captivity, the scribes and priests got together and wrote all these manuscripts we have to develop a story on how the Jews came to be in Babylon. So they pretty much write off the Old Testament as fiction, and one of the first people they write off is Abraham, which then sort of takes the floor out of our faith system. Because if you don't have Abraham, you can't have all the rest of the Bible. So that was what my dissertation was about, was establishing the historicity of Abraham. The critics are going to point out, and it isn't just Bible critics, in general archaeology. If you're telling me you have a late bronze site and you're pulling Iron Age stuff, that's called an anachronism. That doesn't work. An easy example, I told the class this, I don't know, first or second week we're in class. And as far as I know, it's a true story. There is a John Wayne Western out there, wagon trains, going through, was it Monument Valley or whatever in Utah, the Old West story, and you're watching them go along and where are the Indians going to come out and so on. And then you notice in the sky a jet flying across the, that's an anachronism. Doesn't fit. What we like are synchronisms where everything does fit, it integrates. And one of the big anachronisms for, up until around 2005, I guess, was that Abram had to be fiction because it talks about Abraham having camels and camels didn't exist in the time of Abraham. The problem is they were using the wrong date for Abraham. And we were able to correct all of that with the site of Sodom, and I'll talk about all that probably tomorrow. Yeah, no realistic value until the time of Solomon. So there's a lot of credit. They're still out there. This Dr. Israel Finkelstein ran for years the Tel Aviv, the University in Tel Aviv's archaeological. Deaver ran two big ones in the U.S. here. I think University of Arizona and then Cambridge or something. He's a Harvard grad. All that. They're two brilliant minds, but they're misleading a lot of people. It's incredible. All right. Now we're going to turn the lights back on in a minute because I want to show you some stuff. Not quite. So I said many sciences early on. This, and I probably have left out plenty. These are the ones that I could easily remember when I was building this presentation. The number one tool that archaeologists use is pottery. Assemblages, they call them, that they find at a site. Cooking dishes, eating dishes, water vessels, storage, olive jars, perfume bottles. The pottery that you find at a site is how they date a site. And you can date a site pretty accurately with just pottery because of how it changed over time. And we have excellent examples of each time that it changed. So pottery is a huge one. I never got into it the way some people do. I love it, and you're going to see some in a second here. But there are some people, their whole career is pottery. It's incredible. Bones is another one. Can't remember his name. I'll mispronounce it if I do. There are folks who specialize in faunal analysis, which is, if say bones, it's really animal. The animal remains that you find. What did the king eat for dinner? Or what were their diets like and all that? And they get that from an analysis of bones. Another part of this would be skeletons and things, human skeletons and things. How did they die and what age were they? And what was that series? Bones was on TV. You remember Bones? That sort of thing is another science. Human remains, I've got it down there further. Faunal analysis usually has to do with animals. And one of the things we discover from faunal analysis is, as you probably heard before, the Holy Land was full of wild animals, lions, tigers, bears. I mean, plus you read the stories. It's old age is horrible. Who was the guy who held the roof up and then let them all die? Samson, thank you. God, Samson. But anyway, Samson, right? Lions, David and the lion's den, so on and so on. We know there was a lot of wild animals, none anymore. They were all hunted off, hauled away. The kings would come to the Middle East just to go on hunting safaris. And they ate, Mari, the king of Mari, peacock and, all these exotic animals and things. Well, their bones, their remains, you find those when you're excavating. And the guys that do faunal analysis, that's tree ring, same way, dendrochronology. You can tell the age of things. You can also tell pollen, seeds, agriculture, that whole area of vegetation. They learn a lot. When did they have droughts? When did they have an oversupply of water? Right? Weather changes and so on. It's incredible what you can learn if you can discover some of these at your site. Human remains. We have some from Sodom. A lot of sites will get them. You know what the most common human remains are to find at a site? Babies. Two reasons. One, a lot of them didn't survive. A lot of moms didn't survive back then. Two, they were not easily, but they were sacrificed. It was very common to sacrifice a baby and put it in the threshold of going into your house to keep the gods happy and that sort of thing. Incredible. So you'll find human remains. Next week, I'm going to bring in something I found similar to that. Of course, the geography, there are people who just specialize in the geography of the land, and not just as geography, what you're looking at today. What were the levels of the Dead Sea over the past 5,000 years? And that they'll study all those things, how the terrain changed and that sort of stuff. Of course, biblical history, ancient Near East history, and geopolitical knowledge. You have to have all three of those to really understand where you're going to dig and what it's likely to cause while you're there, and then what you're finding as you go down through the different uh, timelines. Of course, engineering is a big one. How could they build this? And I got this hunk of a column here. What did it probably look like when it was fully built, and lots of things. Textiles. Now, there's one you don't think about a lot. So, again, I mentioned a few weeks back, one of the typical sequences you see in a destroyed village called BDA. The city or the village gets built. Attila the Hun comes in, destroys it. That's the D, destruction, typically by burning it to the ground. A, the site gets abandoned. Nobody wants to live there. BDA. Well, textiles. What would you find in archaeology, digging in the dirt, that would tell you you were in the textile section of the community? I'm sorry? Wouldn't the threads all have burnt up? Fabric, all that. Oddly enough, you do occasionally find a little piece of fabric. No. Anybody know how to do weaving on a loom? Ever seen one of them big things? You have something called loom weights. In order to keep it, they run these cords down with heavy weights at the bottom. It's one of the ways it keeps everything tight so you can do your weaving in there. If you've seen a loom, the yarn goes across, then they'll have loom weights that pull it tight. Those loom weights are stone. And so you're digging, you've got all this ash, you brush this ash away, and now you have these stones nicely lined up with a hole in the middle of each one of them. Loom weights were in a textile thing. So textiles are another one. Metallurgy, of course, burial customs, ancient writing languages. We've talked about a lot of that. Warfare. I've got a whole series of lessons I teach on warfare in the Old Testament, the different kinds of weapons, fortifications, strategies, all of that. Aaron Burke, another friend of mine, Dr. Aaron Burke, out in, I think he's at Berkeley, actually. I can't remember. He's in one of the big California schools, has written numerous books on the fortifications and things, so that when you're in excavating, you can tell the age or what kind of wall or whatever it was that you're digging into, because it's all been well documented. Aaron's done just an exceptional job of that. And of course, carbon dating. Everybody likes carbon dating. It's fine. You'll know the date way before you get the carbon dating results back based on all these things above you. But you can't be academic and scientific if you haven't gotten carbon dated, so everybody, you do. Let's see, what have we got? I think we're going to, yeah, I don't want us to run out of time here. This is important, though. This is how archaeology got started. Good old Napoleon. And he sent, they went down to, he was fighting the Brits, went down to capture Egypt, if you will. Didn't work out too well for him in the end. But in that expedition, it was a sort of an age of enlightenment in France. And they didn't want to just go down and take over. They wanted to go down and study. And so 167 engineers and scientists went with the military down. They helped open the Suez Canal, mapped out roads. They helped the architect of building mills, so on and so on. And while they were digging around, not exactly looking for anything specific, they discovered the Rosetta Stone in 1799. And 4 years later, it was translated by Campion, I believe is how you pronounce it, champion. But they were sort of treasure hunters, not a lot of record keeping. They hauled off the Rosetta Stone, a bunch of other things. They didn't hold on to it long. The Brits beat them, and the Brits demanded the Rosetta Stone be given to them, and it was, and today it's in the British Museum, has been ever since the end of this conflict. So the Brits started getting really interested in archaeology and started bringing it into the field of a science. And William Flanders Petrie is considered the father of archaeology. And he was the first to say, we need to look at the smallest detail and document everything we're doing. And eventually he'd go on and discover the tomb of Tutankhamun. And then lots of other people came along after him. But that's what got it started. And then just this here, and then we're going to look at some pictures. So William Albright, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of him. There's the Albright Institute. There's all kinds of Albright things around. Well, you can read the slides. One of the most influential biblical scholars in the 20th century, and authenticated the Dead Sea Scrolls in the mid-50s or late 50s, I guess it was, when they found those. But he was a father of biblical archaeology because he would go dig things, and he was looking for proof of the Bible. And he would go dig and find something and say, see, this proves so-and-so. And then somebody'd come along and discover something else that disproved it. And he was really highly regarded, but a lot of what he established as true later became not true. He was in such a hurry to prove the Bible that he was making mistakes along the way. And it's one of the things they teach you when you study this is don't get so caught up and so focused on what you think the truth is that you miss the truth. But he's highly regarded as the father of biblical archaeology, the first of many. Before him, though, I'll tell you, there were pastors going over into Jordan and Israel in the late 1800s with the Bible in their saddlebag, and they were looking for the things that they were reading about in the Bible as early as the late 1800s. All right, I promised you a couple of pictures. So the approach, tools, and discovery, site excavation. We're going to start looking at site excavation. I kind of showed you the tools. This is what excavation looks like at Sodom. This was the dig that I was on. It's pretty much all you see are the backs of necks and butts when you're working. It's interesting when you go on a dig because you volunteer. Almost everybody in this picture, I think everybody in this picture are volunteer. You don't get paid. It's fun. It's work. You're dead at the end of the day. There's no shade. It's dry and dusty in most places that you're going to be digging, but it's just the thrill of a lifetime. I'm going to show you a couple of things on here. No, that's okay. I want to show you in this picture. You don't really realize what you are looking at here. This is the gateway where Lot was setting when the angels came to visit Lot. On this side of the picture, down here a little, and then going that way, which would be south, the Dead Sea is to my right over here, is the road that leads up to Sodom. So one of the strategic things you do when you build, in fact, if you ever get over to Megiddo, you'll see it there. You never build your front gate and the big driveway coming straight up to it, if you follow me. Your road, your entry road, winds around. And so you'd be coming from the backside of Sodom around to this side and then up a steep incline until you actually got to the gates. It's one of the ways they controlled. You couldn't just come rushing in other words. And so the first day on the site, Dr. Collins took me and we walked that road just like the angels would have up through the gate area. It's incredible. And you'd come in right about where this guy in the red shirt is. I know this is all hard to envision, but I want to show you these. You can see there's 3 in a row here. They're actually all in a row when we get done with it. He might be standing on one, I don't know. Here's another one here, another one here. They're pillar bases. And the gateway area, get out of the projector for a minute, the gateway area had these huge columns or pillars, 12 of them. We found 12 bases, had 12 of them. And a kind of a skylight, if you will, a sunroof lets the light through. And what would happen, probably along here, we're assuming, is where the king and his court would have been setting. You would not have been able to see into the city. You couldn't just come up through the gate and look in the city, particularly as an enemy. And this was walled in, almost like a mall or a customs area. And you'd come in and you'd have to clear customs. And we believe what we're doing right here is excavating one of the administrative offices or buildings or whatever you want to call it. They would have been small. But Lot would have been setting somewhere over here when they when they came in. And this flat area right here, that's road. You'll see better pictures next week. I'm going to bring some in. But you'll notice that for the most part, like here, they're just working in this small and narrow area. They've expanded theirs just a little. Off to the right of us, separated from the entry area, the gateway area, this was all domestic living. And I'll show you some pictures of that. But in the middle of this, we have this trench right here. And that was my big, giant accomplishment. Instead of working on all the little stuff, we needed to move earth because they found this wall. And what's unusual is that this wall is round. Walls aren't round. When you're building them, they're this way. And so they wanted to get this dug through, this bulk wall, they call it, dug through. And we had some heavy boulders to get out of the way and so on. And me and a guy named Victor, who's built like I am, we took on the heavy tools and carefully came around the edge of that wall and expanded the square out. The other thing you'll notice here, see these red lines running along here? Wires. So these are called squares. And they use a surveyor's mark put way back over here so they know exactly the Latin longe, and then everything is measured off that. And we'll get into more of that when we get to Sodom. But you'll see any archaeology site, you're going to see these lines. They're called square lines. Then you're going to see these guys. I don't know if you ever looked at any pictures of archaeology before, but you're going to see these stones all along the edges. Do you know why? Two reasons. One, safety. We don't want anybody falling over the edge. Two, when you dig down like this, like right here, when you dig straight down like that, if somebody steps right there, it's going to slough right off. They might even go in themselves, depending on how deep it is. So it's a safety thing. You'll see that at the... I think I got one more picture, then I want to show you some stuff here real quick before we have to go. I haven't heard any snoring so far. You got to have this. I got to have one picture where Wes did something. Just one. Now, I like this picture. First of all, they handed me the trowel and the tash you see right here. Yeah, I did all of that with that little thing right there. I am really good. No, this is plaster, mud plaster. And in fact, we can actually see mud brick in here, I believe. They're not very good in this picture. The way they would build them, and you can almost see it here, we haven't clarified this yet. You had to be careful. First, you'd go down and you always, the emphasis drives you nuts. You ever dig a hole in the yard? And when you get done, the hole is this, like that. Can't do that here. It's a straight, they're on you all the time about it. What we've got here are 5 layers of stone. They'll put big stone at the bottom, and then you'll put another 4 layers, and then they'll put mud brick, and then they'll plaster that all in. I don't have a really good picture of it here. Next week I've got some good mud brick pictures. It'll blow your mind. And I've also got pictures of how you know when you've arrived at a door. Here's one example here. They stopped. The wall stopped. There's no connecting wall in either direction here. So, because remember, we don't know what's over here. It's all just dirt, and we're just going along. And you find an end, and oh, that's a door, an entryway, something. We've even got, looks like might be a step. Hard to see here. Or it's a mud brick. We're not sure yet. We haven't gotten down that far. But yeah, I had to get Wes. You have to see one picture of Wes with that thing in his hand. And these black things here are called goofas. And so you're scraping this earth away. You're getting all this loose earth. You've got some kind of shovel or a dustpan or something, and you're goofa down there, and you're throwing all this loose dirt in there and humping the thing back up. And then we had field workers, local workers they hired. They haul these off to your dump site. That's what those are all about. All right, you can go ahead and turn the light on. I think we're going to stop there with this. Make sure everybody's awake. Then turn that off. And now I got some really cool things to show you real quick here. in 5 minutes. Actually, I believe Bill has seen them before. You can tell by the bubble wrap. Get that out of the way. So we're going to set these up here for just a second. You can come and have a look. They're irreplaceable, which I knew that when I got them. But I would say that they're even more irreplaceable now, given what's going on over there. But would love to have you all come and have a look for a minute. And I don't know how this is going to pick up on the camera. These are oil lamps, if you're familiar with that or not. And they would put a little piece of linen material, a wick, lay it here. They'd fill this with olive oil, and you'd light it. You'd have a lamp. And these are all different lamps. This is a lamp from the time of Abraham. This is a lamp from the time of Moses. And you can see that, so Abraham was probably 1700, 1800, somewhere in there. Moses, say 14, so about 400 years. Hasn't evolved much, has it? But there is a change. This guy's a little more round on the bottom, and so on. Now we go another 400 years. Now we're the time of David, Iron Age, and now we're getting this, and this is almost totally flat now. And then we're going to the Maccabean age around 125 BC, and almost looks like a pipe that broke off its stem. And then this one, which is this the one you brought in? You brought 2 or 3 of them for the Awana kids.
Yes.
This is a Roman lamp. This is the lamp of the time of Christ. So when he said nobody lights a lamp and puts it under a bushel, this is what they would have been thinking of. When David wrote about your word is a lamp under my feet, that would have been his lamp, and so on. But more than happy to have you come up and have a look. But the interesting thing is, do you think if I dug in your backyard and I found a bunch of these, I could say, well, those things come from 30 AD pretty easily. If I found a bunch of these, and what I like about this is it shows you how archaeology, in a very simplified way, how we can date things, knowing what the pottery is. And yeah, by all means, come on up and have a look. We're going to end our class there. I'll shut the camera off, and you can have a look at those things for a minute.